Welcome. Thank you for being here this morning to the second day of the innovation camp of the SmartDest project. I'm Fabio Carrera. I'm gonna introduce you to the host convener, who's SerenDPT, and give you some information about the data that we collected about the Venice case study as part of the SmartDest project. And then we'll give you the rules for the day, and then we'll start working, basically, today. So you've probably heard this phrase, right? I'm sure it's not unfamiliar to you. So basically, yesterday was the inspiration part. There was a lot of... how many of you were here yesterday? Okay, how many of you were not? Maybe easier. Okay. So some of what I'm going to say is a little bit of a repeat of yesterday, but for those who weren't here, I'm going to repeat some of the introduction. So today's the perspiration part. So yesterday there was a number of presentations and discussions about the issues that emerged from the SmartDest project and the challenges. And today we're going to try to see what we can come up with in terms of solutions to some of those challenges. So here's the plan for the day. Essentially, the morning is going to be dedicated to identifying problems connected to the 4 themes that we have identified, and the afternoon is going to be dedicated to coming up with solutions to those problems. Okay, and then we'll tell you all the details in 1 second. So I'm going to start by introducing SerenDPT, which is a benefit corporation that I founded with others here in Venice, whose main mission is to contribute to the repopulation of the city of Venice by fostering the creation and supporting the launch of startups that create jobs, that then create salaries, that then create residents and repopulate the city. That's what we do. Where we are, for those of you who haven't heard this yet, some of you have heard it many times, but we call this H3 Factory. It's the name we gave it. As you can obviously tell, it was part of a church. It was really part of a complex, a monastery for nuns that was founded in the 1500s. And it's called the Church of Saints Cosmas and Damian. And it was already in the maps as early as 1528. Then in the early 1800s, the convent was abandoned after Napoleon came and put an end to the 1,000 years history of the Venice Republic, unfortunately. And so after being abandoned for a few decades, the church was converted into a factory. And I don't know how many of you know, but Venice was under Austrian domination for about 50 years. And in that period, it was also coincided with the Industrial Revolution everywhere in the world, as well as in Venice. But it was happening in Venice under the Austrians. They brought the bridge, right, the rail bridge, to the mainland. And this island of Giudecca was the industrial area of Venice at that time. All the factories on the island had German names, including this one, which was called Herion. But the Hilton Hotel was called the Stucchi Mills. They made flour there. There was a brewery, Dreher Brewery down the street. On the other side, there was Jungen's factory making clocks and so on. So these are all German factories, essentially. And this one made garments, clothing. It's famous for having provided the clothing for the North Pole expedition of Nobile, the one that didn't end very well, as we know. But they had but the ones that survived thanks to the clothing produced here, I think. You can see in this picture the arch up there. So these floors went all the way into the apses. So you walked in here, there would be a ceiling over your head up until 1985, so not that long ago, really. And then it was abandoned again, and then the city acquired it and restored it to what you see today, thanks to EU funds, precisely to be an incubator. So the restoration of the early 2000s chopped off the floors, brought the church back out because it was completely obliterated. The frescoes were painted white, so you couldn't even see them. So this is the end result of that restoration, and this was meant to be an incubator for startups, and that's how SerenDPT acquired it, and we have it until 2027 to hopefully generate startups and create jobs and produce new residents for the city. So what we do at SerenDPT is three things, essentially. One is culture. Emanuele Vilchvarverio in the back there, who's also, the sound producer for today. He's also the man that is behind all of the cultural events that happen inside the space. A lot of music, a lot of people from the conservatory, concerts, shows, even a movie was shot inside this space, all the interiors of a movie. And there'll be plenty more to come thanks to the creativity of Emanuele. Thank you, Emanuele, once again. Thank you, Emanuele. So that's the culture. The other thing we do is startups, and the main program there is MIT DesignX Venice. And today is actually a combined day where we actually are also here to try to recruit potential participants in the DesignX program for next year. So if some good ideas come out of today, we can encourage you to actually submit them for the program of DesignX. So DesignX is a collaboration between SerenDPT and MIT DesignX Boston, the original one, and we basically duplicated it over here, and we have a yearly program every year that starts in the spring with recruitment events. There's a submission on July 31st this year, but today we're circled because it's the last of the recruitment days today. But you still have until the 31st of July if you want to submit for the program. We select 10 startups out of the submissions, and those 10 go through the actual workshops with MIT faculty who come from Boston to teach our startups how to become great companies. So the fall program is 4 workshops and a final pitch day. Last year we graduated the first 10 startups, and this year we have some representatives here actually that participated. They're fair. It should be Fair Up now. We got to get the new logo, but the Fair Up they're here and they participated last year. Upstairs, there's See the Change here that is hosted here, and we also have PESCO somewhere. I don't know, but there's PESCO people here today as well. These people are here because we actually incubate them here. The ones that choose to settle in Venice and set up their headquarters in Venice, Historic Center. Then we host them here and we provide them with teams of American students that can help them with their progress. So they basically get extra help if they stay here. But everybody gets $4,000 up front, and at the end there's a $10,000 final prize available for the top 3, so 5, 3, 2. So you could get as much as 9,000 euros, but minimum you're going to get 4,000 just to cover the costs of participating, because it's in person, because the faculty come from Boston to help you, and so you better be here physically, not any other way. The Boston program, so we're not only duplicating the system and the methods, but we're hoping to duplicate the results also in the long run. They created over 300 jobs in 5 years in Boston, all kinds of really good startups with great valuations. We hope to do something like that here in Venice, and we'd be very happy to produce even a fraction of these jobs, which in Venice would be a big deal, actually. So that was the startups section, and then there's the research component of what we do. And one main thing that I'm going to mention is the Venice Project Center. I am a professor at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts, and since 1988 I've been bringing American students to Venice to do all kinds of research about Venice. So for those of you who are interested in doing something for Venice, know that we have 35 years of data to provide to you in case you want to solve some of the big problems of Venice. And the students are the same ones that help the startups in case they need help. But leaving that aside, I just want to say if you're here from Venice, on Monday, the current group of students are going to be presenting their results at 4 o'clock here this Monday, coming up. So if you're interested, come back. But finally, we get to the most important thing, and the reason why we're here today, which is the SmartDest project. SerenDPT participated in this as the case study representative for Venice, and so we've been part of this project since the beginning, and we're hosting this event as part of the SmartDest project. I don't know if you weren't here. Essentially, SmartDest is a European Horizon project with the participation of 11 or 12 major institutions, and with 8 case study cities, now reduced to 7, and that include Amsterdam, Barcelona, Lisbon, Ljubljana, and many others. That's the essence of SmartDest. The idea was to study the social exclusions created by over-tourism in particular, and the causes and the potential solutions. So today is part of the figuring out some of the solutions. The idea is that at the end, we might be able to propose some policies, maybe even at the European level. That is kind of the final goal. We have one more final meeting in Barcelona in September to wrap everything up. And in Venice, what we did, because it was every case study interpreted a little different, we were focused on the exclusion of residents as the social exclusion that we studied, and we looked at 3 dimensions: jobs, housing, and urban transportation as cofactors to the depopulation of the city of Venice. I don't know if we need to prove that Venice is an over-touristed city. I think we can skip this slide. But basically, Venice lost over 125,000 inhabitants since World War II, which is about 3/4 of the population that we had after 1950. So that's the historical fluctuation of population in Venice. Starting in the 1300s, every down peak, every minimum is a plague. And after every plague, Venice rebounded in population. You can see that the population in the 1500s was almost as high as today, right? Or almost as high as 1950. But we're now going in this downward spiral from which there seems to be no rebound at this moment. But obviously, what we do here, and what a lot of people are trying to do, is to do something to repopulate the city with real residents. I'm going to skip this slide, and even this one. But no, let me just say that the depopulation in Venice has had different phases, but the current phase is the one that we're most interested in. So right now, the main reason why people leave is they go off to study, and then they get a degree in something, and then they come back. Maybe they try to come back to Venice, but there are no jobs for those degrees in Venice because the prevailing economy is tourism. So if you don't work in tourism, you're pretty much not going to have a lot of opportunities. We're an aging population here in Venice, like all of Italy, but perhaps worse. The scary thing is the bottom right here. That's the recent births in Venice, essentially. That bar is going to move up gradually, and if nobody else moves into Venice, that's going to be more or less the population we're going to have in the next decades. So we're looking at who leaves. This is part of the Venice case study results that I'm giving you a little summary of. Essentially, the primary age group that leaves are in the working age group. But in reality, people leave at every age. little children leave, which means their parents obviously leave, right? Students leave to go to college and then have a hard time coming back. But interestingly, retirees also leave in good numbers, and that's an interesting, some thought should be given as to why retirees leave. But there might be people that are just fed up with living in Venice and just can't wait to get out of here, maybe. So part of our case study entailed doing a whole over 200 interviews. We interviewed commuters going in and out of the city. Paolo and Giacomo interviewed 28 students to see some of whom managed to remain, some of them left. And we also interviewed about 60, almost 60 Venetians who migrated out of Venice to find out, why they left, would they come back, blah, 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 all those. And the essence of the story is that I just already told you, the most recent wave, people leave for study primarily. They don't come back because of work. And they would like to come back, the last pie. The majority of them would like to come back. But they won't be able to unless there's more variety of jobs, and then there's housing and all the other issues as well, obviously. People who commute, there are people who commute from Venice out of Venice to work, and that's an interesting aspect, I think, because they all have higher-end type jobs, none of them obviously in tourism, but they also commute only primarily to Mestre and Marghera, because that's how far you can get with the transportation that we have, and that's why transportation is one of the factors. So, any questions about this? I mean, I will put the poster back up. We have a poster for this, which you can put back up. But this is just a little bit of, food for thought for the problems and solutions in case you want to focus in Venice. Today doesn't have to be about Venice, but if it can be, we don't mind that. But it doesn't have to.
We also got the policy brief, so they have a wide spectrum of
right.
topics that we touched in our project and the type of challenges that every such problem presents for policy. And maybe I would like to add one thing, that it's not Thank you, Fabio. It's not necessarily about inventing a new policy. You might also be inspired by very concrete issues that can have a solution in terms of a new planning idea, a new service, a new product, a new way of involving people in participating in the governance of a tourist city. It doesn't have to be necessarily about over-tourism. You can also have effects from the simple presence of tourism that in some way are excluding local communities. In our project we have worked extensively on labor, and labor in tourism is one of the most critical issues because it tends to be very badly paid and seasonal. And some of our case studies took a broader approach towards understanding cities as increasingly populated by transnational populations who stay for a very brief period of time or longer period of time, as in the case of Turin with the student population, and still representing a sort of a challenge, a threat for more stable forms of life in the city. So the landscape of problems that you might want to tackle is actually wider than your typical over-tourist situation. But at the same time, I assume that most of you are in Venice, are inspired by Venice, are working on Venice, and Venice is a very good laboratory for all that along the dimensions that Fabio has touched right now.
Turn it off. Okay, so today's is what we call an ideathon, which is a design-based sort of hackathon, essentially. This is from the MIT program. So basically it's a different process in design, but you guys are probably familiar with it. But it's more like intuitive and more experimental and more recursive than the typical analytical kind of approach where you go gradually straight to the solution. It's more whirly. And this is why we do this in two phases. We do the problem first, and then we do the solution. Because if you start from an idea and you go straight to developing whatever you think is a great solution without really putting enough thought into the problem side, you end up with something like this, where you cruise towards nowhere and spend a lot of time at the end trying to figure out why things are not working because you just went straight into a solution that you thought was good, but you didn't really test it out and vet it, and didn't really discuss it, especially with the ultimate stakeholders and ultimate beneficiaries. This is what we do instead. We focus a lot early on the problem, and we'd rather put a lot of time into that and then produce the solution, with a lot less possibility of chaos later on, as opposed to the other way around. So the goals today is basically to identify these problems and begin to think about solutions, and hopefully you guys can meet people that you can maybe become a team with, and then eventually potentially consider applying for Design X even. So this is the plan: frame the challenges and then craft the solutions. So I'm going to pass it over to Donna, who's going to tell us exactly how that's going to work today.
Thanks to Fabio and to colleagues. So today is all about ideas and very much around using design thinking to narrow down on some solutions. Just as Fabio said there, it's not about solutionism, so we're not rushing to solutions. The morning is very much about narrowing down on the problem and developing a problem frame, which we will agree around, and then in the afternoon we will develop solutions for those problems, for those problem frames. So this morning when you came here, you were broken up, or you essentially decided what kind of theme you're looking to sit on for the morning session. So we have 4 themes: inclusive tourism, housing affordability, everyday mobility, and then data democracy and community empowerment. So you've already been assigned one of those tables. When we begin, we'll go to that table. The first part of it will be facilitated, so there will be a facilitator that will sit at each of those tables, and they will be fixed. So you are free to move around as the discussion continues in the morning, but the facilitators will stay at the table depending on the theme. So we'll spend the first hour essentially narrowing down on the problem, and we want to focus on the lived experience of stakeholders, how they experience that problem. So we want to develop a problem statement, and after the first hour, we will share those problem statements, and after lunch, we will start to work on solutions for those problem statements. So the timetable is like this. We begin at 11 with those breakout tables, which is the discussion around the ideas, around the problems, excuse me. Then at 12, we will do a plenary recap of those problems. At 12:30, we'll have a lunch break where we will continue the conversation. And then at 3:30, we will break out again into new tables based on the problem frames that we've agreed on in the morning session. 1:30. Then the afternoon will be all about developing ideas that respond to that problem frame. And then at 4 o'clock, we will do a plenary recap of the solutions, and then we'll have some concluding remarks from colleagues, and then some more aperitifs like yesterday. So as I said, the morning is very much around framing these challenges under the topics that we've chosen. So there's a quote here from Albert Einstein, and he says, "If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions." So the morning is very much around thinking about the problem and sharing amongst ourselves how we see the problem, referencing, if possible, or if we want to, the SmartDest outputs to evidence that problem, and then narrow down on a problem frame that describes that problem in a one-sentence statement. So the rules for this morning session are that we start at our assigned themed tables, So we will meet each other and we'll just introduce ourselves, and the facilitator will explain, I suppose, what we're doing. Then, until 11, we will brainstorm problems within our tables. So firstly, we will individually take some Post-its and write down our own ideas around the problem, what we see as a problem within the thematic area that we're sat at. Then we'll have a group discussion, which will be facilitated by our facilitators, and then we will synthesize and start to develop a problem statement ready for the plenary recap at 12. So table 1 is inclusive tourism with Dejan and Tadej. Then housing affordability with myself and Giacomo. Then 3 is everyday mobility with Loris and Amit. And then number 4 is data democracy and community empowerment with Anna and Josep. If there are more required on those tables, which I don't think will be the situation this morning, we can arrange another table. So in terms of roles, we want to keep, for facilitators, your goal is really to keep everyone on task, allow everyone to speak so that everyone's voice is heard in that process, converge on problems, and then define a problem statement. We want to be asking probing questions. If required, access the SmartDest outputs. We have a QR code here which leads us to a whole variety of SmartDest outputs from across the case studies from Amsterdam to Venice. And then at 12 we will present at the plenaries. So the start is really much about, time to meet your group and get started. We will meet your group. You'll connect. You'll introduce yourselves, tell them why you're here, start to brainstorm around the problems. Then the facilitator will help craft a problem statement. Within the problem statement, you really want to be clear about what the problem is, why is it a problem, and who is it a problem for. So really describing the lived experience of that problem. So for example here, in terms of developing a problem statement, you want to have a very clear problem statement. So for example, going to the pharmacy is a pain. Why is that a pain? Because people have to stand in line when they're sick, they're exposed to other sick people, they waste time going from their homes to the pharmacy when they need to rest and recover. So this is an example of a problem statement that explains what the problem is, why is it a problem, and how is it a problem, in terms of how that stakeholder experiences that problem. So the next hour is very much around brainstorming ideas around the problem, and at the end we want each table to have a succinct 1 or 2 problem frames that we will share in the plenary, and then at 12 we will convene and decide how to move forward with those problem frames. So without further ado, I'll hand back to my esteemed colleague Fabio.
But we realized we just got the tally, so we have a few more people per table than the maximum of 5. There's one particular theme, number 4, the data issue that had more than had about 8. So essentially, we can begin if there's too few people. So basically, the idea is, we don't want to have too many people at the table because otherwise the discussion gets bogged down with too many people. But if we only have a few people, that's also not that great because then there's just a few people talking. So we may just assign a couple of you to a larger table. But if you've been assigned to table 1, 2, 3, or 4, just know that the 1 through 3 tables are in the offices right here, and table 4 is in the apps over there by the door. So those are the first 4 tables. The other that have been assigned to 5 and 6, let's just figure out if we could just spread you around or if it's worth making another table just for you. So why don't you all go to your tables, grab something to drink, some fruit, and then we'll meet you in the rooms. And 5 and 6, come up front and let me know who you are. All right, go to work. Roll up your sleeves. Yoo-hoo!